Welcome back to Dungeon Brew. Today we're going to be talking about evil parties again, and this time, first tier play. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Dungeon Brew.
Alright everybody, welcome back to Dungeon Brew. We are going to be talking about first tier play in regard to evil parties. So you've had your session 0, like we talked about in the last video. You've kind of set some ground rules. Everybody's come to a consensus on what is appropriate and what is inappropriate during your gameplay sessions. And now you're getting ready to actually start out. You want the party to start moving forward together and adventuring together. And the way that you go about doing that is what this video is all going to be all about.
Yeah, and you kind of start off with, let's just jump into how you're going to start that with it. It's going to be a lot of when you're playing with good characters. You're going to start setting up little small encounters and events to kind of have your players test their characters out and see who they are and how they're going to handle situations.
Right.
And this could be something as well as like a small band they're sent to go investigate or even eliminate. It could be investigating a crime around the city. It could be something where they're essentially being brought together for very small quests so they can kind of test trial these new characters that they're trying to play.
Right. Gameplay honestly does not differ that much from a good party. You have the same quests, the same problems that exist in the world of good characters exist in the world of evil characters. The main difference is how those characters choose to resolve those problems. And sometimes it's difficult for a character to conceptualize how they might approach solving a quest in an evil way, or how they come to that conclusion. So you talked about somebody committing a crime. Let's say that there is a tavern keeper who has been stealing from the till. One of the bar people is stealing from the till, and the party is tasked with trying to figure out who that person is. And you would set up the quest the same way that you normally do, where they go through and they collect evidence and eventually come to a conclusion that it's Bill, the barkeep, who is stealing from the till. When they confront him, the way that you can start to try and bring this together is actually by allowing the NPC to start presenting options before the party in a way that gives them some clue as to how they could play their characters in an evil way. And generally speaking, a good party would just immediately either arrest Bill and bring him forward to the magistrate, or they would go let the tavern keeper know so that he could deal with that internally or something like that. But what the party may decide to do is have a conversation with Bill, and when Bill talks to them, he says, "Hey, listen, I will give you half of the money that I've stolen if you don't turn me in." And that's like option A for how can we, as a party, play evil instead of playing good.
Mm-hmm. And this will continue to build on top of this. And I think what you're pointing at here is how it sounds so silly, but you're teaching your players how to be evil players.
Yes.
Because not all of us necessarily have that inclination of knowing how to handle things. So yeah, option A is, hey, I'll give you 50% of what I've taken for you to utilize. And then the party might be like, hey, we want 100% or we want 75%. So that might be an option.
Right.
And so then Bill comes back and he says, listen, I'll give you 75% if you promise not to turn me in after you take 75% from me. So again, you're kind of feeding ideas of what their options are as an evil party, because they may not have thought of, hey, we could take 75% and still turn him in.
Right.
Now you've given them an option of option B. We can take money and turn him in and still have the renown of the town or of the innkeeper for doing the task that was done while also pocketing some extra gains.
Or option C is, hey, I've hidden the money somewhere. I will take you to it, and I'll give you all of it if you just let me go. And then the party might decide, well, why would we let him go? That's going to be a loose end. Why don't we just silence him there? And he takes them outside of town, and they decide that they're going to kill him or something like that. And then they can create their own narrative. They come back to town and say, hey, listen, we found out it was Bill the barkeep, and when we tried to confront him, he ran away and we lost him in the woods. We don't know where he went. Yeah. But and his body will never be found.
or option D. Sorry, I love my option D that I just thought of. Is that you work out a deal with Bill that he continues to steal money, and you pinpoint it on the waitress so that she gets in trouble for it, and then he's feeding you money regularly through the innkeep for you to be able to utilize for things until, the innkeep figures out it's like, oh, somebody else is now taking it. It's like, oh, someone else has picked up what the waitress was doing. Let's keep pushing on. And then your quest becomes into a multi-layered quest or adventure of you essentially continuing to siphon money from this tavern in the middle of town.
But the point is all of these options are options that in one way, shape, or form should probably be fed to the party, especially, level 1, level 2, when they're getting comfortable with the idea of playing an evil character. That they should be fed to the party through that NPC. So he might initially start out offering them, option A, and then depending on their response, you go, well, listen, this is option B. Why don't we do this? And they continue to argue with him or try to do something, and he continues to present options to them, and that gives them the ability to kind of go, wait, these are all of the things that we could be doing in this scenario, and that's really what you want. The most important thing, though, as a DM, is to not give options to the party that you are not willing to accept the consequences of. So, if they were offered 50 gold to solve the crime of who's stealing from the till, don't allow Bill to have 2,000 gold stored up that he is trying to hide away or something like that. Because if the party ends up, taking all of it, do you really want them to have that much gold at level 1? What are the implications of that? Keep things in perspective. Be aware of what the party could potentially do when greed operates as a motivator for them.
And this is really a challenge, I think, for the DM, is to think about each of these scenarios and what the different options are. Because really, through your first tier of play, and we're talking about like level 1 through level 5, you're really kind of coaching the party. You're offering them options that you're okay with them undergoing. You are having to be the creative one to present that through NPCs, so that the party then can grow into their characters, and they then become the more creative ones in like tier 2, tier 3, tier 4.
Right.
This is really a place for you to sit down and kind of hash out what are all the different ways that this could go for the characters, and again, what am I okay with them actually engaging in based on the conversations we had in session 0.
Yeah, and I'm not going to lie, playing or GMing a party of evil characters is definitely a little bit more of an exercise in creativity, because you have to conceptualize some of those consequences or some of those options that the party might present. Because even though you're offering options A through D and you think you've got things covered, never doubt that they're going to come in with option E, which even if you're used to DMing normal, good aligned general parties, you always find that, the party always comes up with a different option. With evil, it just feels like it's kicked up a notch, because then the doors are opened a little bit in terms of what they feel like they're allowed to do within the constraints of the alignment that they're choosing to play.
Yeah, and I kind of want to chime in too in terms of like world building. We have our world building series that is out there. This is something that you really kind of want to have down pat before you bring an evil party into the setting that you've created. You want to know what the laws of the lands are, what the culture's like, what the implications of things are, because your party is going to test those as an evil party, and you have to really know your world and all of these different aspects to be able to respond to it. Sometimes, God, man, my mind today, not innovatively, but essentially on the spot, you have to be able to just be able to respond to that, knowing what your world is like.
Yeah. So, we talked about this as an option. Really what you're wanting to accomplish in first tier play here is to not only help the party, help the individual players to kind of conceptualize their evil character, realize them, develop their personality, determine what it is that they're going to do when the training wheels are off and they've got access to the full breadth of the alignment that they've chosen to play. But you're also wanting to start to set up long-term consequences for the actions that they're choosing to take. So if they're doing certain things with this barkeep, where they end up murdering him, let's say. So they took him out into the woods, they got all the money, and they decided to kill him. Eventually the body will be found, and eventually someone's going to investigate what's going on, and that should be a consequence that comes back to the players at a later stage in the game. So that might be something that comes towards the end of Tier 1, it might come at the beginning of Tier 2, but it should be something that eventually plays itself out for the party, because those actions that they chose to engage in should eventually come back and haunt them in some way. This is more likely to occur early in Tier 1 because they're new to their characters that are going to be making mistakes. And ultimately, even if they are thinking through, how are we going to hide the body, the roles aren't going to be nearly as good as they are in later tiers. And that kind of reflects their criminal familiarity. Like, how good are they at actually being criminals when they're first starting out, type of a situation. There are other options, other things that you can do for this. This should be your like overarching adventure. So, what are they going to do when they're hired by villain, or what are they going to do when they're hired by like a duke that is wanting them to go rescue this damsel in distress? And then is the duke going to offer them other options to do evil things? So, the scenario might be something along the lines of the big adventure, right? The big adventure for Tier 1 is there is this woman who's gone missing, and they're supposed to go and find her. Well, the Duke is hiring the party, but in reality, he doesn't actually want her found because of some kind of implication to his rulership of the realm. So he might ask them to go kill the damsel in distress in some way. So she wasn't stolen, she ran away because she knew that she was going to be killed. So this is like a traditional good party thing where they go and they try and rescue this damsel, and it usually would start with finding the damsel, and the damsel wants them to do something with the Duke. But for the evil party, they start with the Duke and they target the damsel.
I was just thinking in that scenario and talking about alignment, bringing it back around, you may see that a chaotic evil, neutral evil, and lawful evil characters handle that differently. When you have a duke that is providing this ruling of like, go find this damsel, go kill her, I need her out of my way, you may see each one of them handling it differently based on their own characteristic, even when they're working for an evil duke who's asking them to go and engage in this task. The chaotic evil person may make the decision on the spot on what they want to do in this particular scenario based on how they feel about the damsel, how they feel about the duke, what their own moral standards are. You may see the neutral evil person being very structured in how they want to handle it. And again, it could go either way based on how they see the layout of the land, who the duke's enemies are, where their allegiances are or alliances are. And the lawful evil person may follow through with killing her because he has a lawful individual telling him to kill her, and so he's pushed to do that. This kind of goes back to how we handle inter-party conflict that we talked about prior. But even within an evil party, if you have those different shades of evil within that party, you may have your characters have different ideas of how they want to handle quests. And you, again, should have discussed that prior on how you're going to handle that, because I know I'm rambling a little bit, but I'm just thinking, even when you have an evil individual giving you an evil task, your evil party members may respond to that task differently.
Right. So, and even in regard to this, there are a couple of things that I do want to clarify. So, one, how did the party end up with this evil duke or whatever? Those should be consequences of actions that occurred in the village. They were caught for the murder or something like that. They get turned to the magistrate. The magistrate gets contacted by the duke, and the duke blackmails the party in order to accomplishing this task. Right. So that's option. Another option for this is that instead of just having the Duke as a player in this game, you have other political figures who have their own motivations, and they're pulling the party in different ways, saying, I know what the Duke has told you to do. I want you to do something else. Or the party eventually comes across the damsel and they realize that there could be some kind of benefit in doing something else with her other than killing her, because she also has political power. So maybe they want to hold her captive in order to try and elicit some kind of benefit from having her underneath their control, ransom her out, or ultimately decide to kill her because they think that they're going to benefit from having the Duke on their side. They could actually hold her hostage and say, hey, listen, Duke, if you really want us to kill her, you're going to have to give us more than what you originally offered. So you should provide in some way those options. Like, those are things that can come from third-party NPCs that come in and say, hey, listen, I know what the Duke asked you to do. I want you to do this instead. And start to generate some of those ideas and some of those concepts for the group as a whole, so that they can start to think of other ways that they can approach this political situation that is not just doing what the Duke told them to do, but somehow trying to benefit themselves in a specific way. again, first tier play. First tier play is allowing the characters to familiarize themselves with their alignment, starting to set up some of the action availability based off of that alignment, encouraging the notion that actions have consequences, and then allowing those consequences to play out in ways that open up new quest possibilities. And ultimately, those quest possibilities should end up with something that affects the region in a certain specific way, like allow this to grow just beyond that specific town or something like that, to where they're engaged with something on a larger scale. And then again, they have options, and those options should be presented with some obvious implications for what consequences could be. And the party has to make a decision of how do we deal with what's going on in this scenario. Those things can start to breed the interesting role-playing opportunities for a party that is particularly evil. And the biggest thing is when you start creating common enemies like the Duke in this scenario, then the party becomes aligned together. They start working together. They are in a similar scenario where they have to think about what they want to do in relation to this common enemy, to make sure that they themselves aren't caught alone and ultimately at risk because of their decisions.
So I'm just thinking of one more tip that I want to add in as you're talking about that, because this can get very convoluted and confusing for a DM to follow every little piece, because this really is like a learning process, especially as parties are, if it's a party that's playing evil for the first time, there can be a lot of moving parts. So keeping just track of this in like your own notes and what decisions the party is making, and at each juncture, and writing that down so you have an idea, so you can again be creative and brainstorm later on what might occur or what might happen as you start moving to other tiers of play, can be really helpful.
Right. There's definitely this snowball effect that can occur with a lot of this. With evil parties in particular, it's a very good idea to kind of play as it goes. Trying to plan too far in advance is difficult because there is a certain degree of unpredictability that occurs in these types of campaigns.
All right. Well, I hope this has been helpful for you guys in kind of jumping into first tier play, unless you have something else to add, John, on this level.
I don't think so.
All right, then we will see you guys next week when we talk about second tier play.
Jon and Josh.